Hi everyone and welcome back to Tennis Time. So the 2020 tennis season is over and therefore it's time for the Tennis Time channel to review the 2020 tennis season. This occasion is also marking the first occasion when I've recorded at the end of last year the first Tennis Time channel video, and as an anniversary I have a new Tennis Time plaque as a gift from my wife for that 1 year anniversary. So this one is a special video edition from today. Alright, so a lot of things happened in the 2020 season, a lot of things to discuss and dig into. So the schedule I want to follow today is the following. I'm going to show you the schedule of the 2020 season, what was planned at the beginning of the year, which event should have happened when, and basically what has come of it. After that, I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper into the Australian Open, the biggest stories, the biggest matches which happened during the Aussie Open. Then basically we have a long break till the end of August. There were some exhibition matches along the way, the so-called famous Adria Tour. That's something maybe worth talking about. After that, deep dive into the Cincinnati event just ahead of the US Open, then the US Open. After that, Rome, the tournament which was held in preparation for the French Open, then the French Open which was moved from June to August, and then all the other notable tournaments, mostly Paris and the ATP Finals at the end of the year. I have also a few categories. Stories of the year, the match of the year on the Slam and regular ATP Tour side, the most impressive player apart from the Big Four, in my opinion, for the year 2020, the most improved player or players for that matter, the most improved newcomer of 2020, and the best performance in a single tennis match in the year of 2020. And last but not least, who I think deserves the award or the recognition as the player of the year. Alright, so let's dig in. First, as you can see on the left side of the screen, so this was the schedule for the slams as usual. January, February, the Australian Open. In June we have the French. In July we have Wimbledon. And very late August, early September, we have the US Open. And then the regular Masters 1000 tournaments in Indian Wells and Miami in North America in March. Then moving in April to Europe to the clay season, having Monte Carlo, Madrid and Rome before the French Open. We should have had in July the Olympics as well. As you know, tennis is also an Olympic event. Then ahead of the US Open preparation tournaments in Canada, Toronto and Cincinnati, and after the US Open, the Masters 1000 in Asia, the Asia Swing Shanghai, then coming back to Europe, the Paris Masters and the ATP Finals. So basically what happened was the Australian Open was held. That was before the pandemic broke, but that was not a regular Australian Open in the sense that there were also some concerns at the very beginning. People were afraid that that's a tournament which could not be held because of the whole Australian bushfires. There were a lot of movements going on and potential problems on smoke, which could have perturbed the players from playing and performing at the highest level. So there was a discussion on the topic if the air was clean enough. In the end, it was okay, and they went ahead with the organization. Then the pandemic hit, and as you can see on the right hand side of the screen, all the tournaments I've marked with red are cancelled. So it's a considerable number of tournaments. Most notable one is Wimbledon, of course. It's probably the most prestigious Grand Slam of all. And yeah, it was cancelled for the first time since the Second World War. French Open knew it could not be held in June, but the court surface is not as sensible as grass at Wimbledon, and they thought okay, early autumn it still might be warm enough to help to hold it. For the first time, the French Open has prepared a roof. They had lights, so they thought, okay, we can move it to toward the end of September, early October, when the U.S. Open is all done. We're gonna have our French Open because until then, the whole pandemic topic is going to be gone. Well, that's not exactly how it happened, but we did have a French Open in October this year. As you can see in the amounts, Miami, Monte Carlo, Madrid were cancelled. Rome was also postponed for the end of September. Olympics cancelled, Toronto cancelled, Shanghai cancelled, the Paris Masters and the ATP Finals were held. Although most of these tournaments were played without spectators, which was a really big topic throughout the entire year, especially when the tour restarted in New York, because the tournament, which was supposed to be played in Cincinnati, the Western and Southern Open, for security reasons, health concerns, it was moved from Cincinnati to New York. So that was a big discussion topic at that point in time. There were absolutely no, I mean, the safety concerns were just too high, and it was not allowed for the tournaments to have spectators in the stadium. At the beginning, there were a lot of discussions, and it was a little bit uncomfortable, but in the end, I think all tournaments were really worthy of organizing, watching. We had quality matches. So from that perspective, even though very sad for the people not to be able to participate and cheer on their players, nonetheless we had the chance to watch really great tennis on TV. So if we look back at the Australian Open at the beginning of the year, when things were relatively still normal, we had some fantastic matches in the early stages of the tournament. We had a great fight between Roger Federer and John Millman. John Millman is famous for putting out Federer a few years back at the US Open in the fourth round. So Federer should have had a clash with Djokovic, but Millman has beaten Federer, and that did not happen at the US Open. So it almost happened again. Millman was playing so well, Federer maybe wasn't at his best, and most notably in the final set tiebreak, Millman had a really big lead, and because now they're playing a fifth set tiebreak for the first time at the Australian Open, Roger Federer escapes because it's a tiebreak till 10 points won with a 2-point cushion difference. Federer escapes through. Also, if not the match of the tournament in the fourth round, Wawrinka beating Medvedev. Medvedev surprisingly not winning a match in 5 sets throughout his whole career up until to that point. Another fantastic match in the fourth round was Nadal playing Kyrgios. It was a night match, fantastic atmosphere. Another great match in the quarters, participating again Nadal, but this time losing to Team being really impressive, playing his best in the key moments, and winning all 3 tiebreakers they played in that match. So even though Roger Federer played only this single tournament throughout this entire year, because he had a knee surgery shortly after the Australian Open, he features in one of the best matches of the year. He had a fantastic comeback. He was 2-1 down, and he really looked down and out. He looked injured. Nonetheless, he managed to turn it around against Dennis Sandgren. And we had a really, really good final, 5-setter between Dominic Thiem and Novak Djokovic. Djokovic pulled a Houdini there. He looked down and out, especially after the end of that third set, but managed somehow to take a little break, toilet break, bathroom break, or whatever you want to call it. Came back and managed to scrape through in that fourth and fifth sets. So Federer is featuring in this tournament as winning the most spectacular matches against Millman and Sandgren back to back. He had a big clash a match against Djokovic in the semis, but by that time he was a little bit out of touch. He was probably a little bit injured as well, and that was not a very spectacular match. I've talked about it before. The bushfire relief efforts were really inspiring, led in many ways by Nick Kyrgios and other tennis players participating. So that was something really good to see throughout this year, at the beginning of the year. Big story was Djokovic winning, this being his 8th Australian Open title and his 17th major overall, so really edging closer to Nadal and Federer, since Nadal was at that point at 19 slams and Federer at 20. The way he was playing, he looked pretty much unstoppable, and you would have thought he would win a few more slams during the 2020 season. So after that we had the big break, when Indian Wells was firstly cancelled, and most of the tournaments were cancelled up until the end of August. The restart of the season was basically happening in New York. The Cincinnati tournament, which was basically moved to New York and held in New York. It was the first Masters 1000 of the 2020 year. It was also the first time I've seen no lines people, apart from the ATP Next Gen final from the end of the year. They were also very careful in implementing all health and safety regulations because of the Adria Tour misfortunes or mishaps, people getting COVID and not being careful going to party during the nighttime, stuff like that. So they were making really sure things like that never happen again. The tournament in New York was pretty much held in a bubble, so people were restricted not to leave their hotels and the compound where we were training and playing the matches. It was briefly before the tour got restarted that Federer confirmed that he had a second knee surgery and he's not going to play the 2020 season anymore at all. That was a big news at the time. Nadal decided to skip the US hardcourt season due to the COVID-19 concerns. At that time, Djokovic did enter the Cincinnati tournament with an 18-0 record. He's won the ATP Cup, Australian Open and Dubai. Novak Djokovic, world number 1, wins the Cincinnati event and equals Nadal's record of 35 Masters 1000 titles. And this was also a fantastic achievement because with that title win, he made sure that he's won every Masters 1000 event at least twice. So quite a remarkable achievement. And that made him, of course, favourite in entering to the US Open. And that brings us to the US Open 2020, which started on 31st of August this year. Very early rounds, really big matches. Andy Murray beating Nishikawa from 2 sets to love down. That was quite some match. And then we had some other dramatic matches. In the third round, Borna Coric beating Stefanos Tsitsipas from 2 sets to 1 down, and also from 6 match points down. So fantastic drama in that match. Speaking of drama that was going on also in the quarters between Pablo Carreño Busta and Denis Shapovalov. Shapovalov thought at the end of the 4th set that Pablo Carreño Busta was kind of done. He couldn't move anymore, but it was quite obvious in the 5th that Carreño Busta just had to let that 4th set go, and it has given him the opportunity to gather his powers, and he was really there in that quarterfinal, and he's beaten Shapovalov in that 5th set. Pablo Carreño Busta still impressive in the semis. He was 2 sets to love up against Zverev, not so impressive, but then found his game, turned it around, and he's won that 5-set thriller semi-final. And then, talking about 5-set thrillers, the final between Thiem and Zverev. This time Zverev leading 2-0 and Thiem coming back. So the story of the tournament, there were some stories, not just the fact that Thiem has won his first Grand Slam title, and he was the first person ever to be born after the 1980s and winning a Grand Slam tournament. That seems big enough, but next to that, there was the Djokovic-Pablo Carreño Busta match where Djokovic was defaulted because of hitting a lineswoman in the throat with a tennis ball accidentally, but with intent, and because of that he was defaulted, disqualified. So that was quite a story. The semi-final in itself was also a big story. It was for Zverev, the first time winning a match from 2-0 down, and for Thiem, he was the first ever since 1949 to win a match in the US Open final from being 2-0 down. And also a very notable feat for Andy Murray. As I've pointed out, he had a fantastic match in the first round. He's joined the list of other 3 all-time greats who have managed to come back 10 times from 2-0 down. So on that leaderboard, Roger Federer, Boris Becker, and Aaron Krickstein. Maybe Krickstein is not one of the all-time greats, but still a hell of a player if he managed to win 10 matches from 2-0 down. Okay, when the US Open was done, let's move on to Europe, because the tour has moved at that time from North America to Europe. Rome was rescheduled, not being held in May, moved to September. So it was the first clay court Masters of the year, and Djokovic was entering with a 26-0 winning record and had just that disqualification. So he really looked very hot at this point in time, and he was the favorite, or one of the favorites to win the tournament, alongside Rafa Nadal. But Rafa Nadal has skipped, as I mentioned before, the hardcourt season. He was a little bit out of match practice, which possibly had meant that he lost to Diego Schwartzman in his 3rd match in Rome in the quarterfinals, although he had 2 first good wins, but Schwartzman was just a lot better than him on that day. Kaspar Ruud, he's showing himself quite impressively in the Rome Masters, reaches the semi, and seems to be really a new guy, a new threat on clay. Schwartzman just goes on, and he doesn't just beat Nadal, but he also beats Shapovalov in the semis and reaches his first final, where he plays Djokovic, where Djokovic wins his 5th title in Rome, and he wins his 36th Masters 1000 title. So he edges one ahead of Rafa Nadal, who has 35. And one other notable thing what happens in Rome, Musetti, a new, young, up-and-coming 18-year-old Italian, beats Stan Wawrinka in the first round 6-love and 7-6. This is a very impressive match because Wawrinka, ahead of the Rome tournament, has went to Prague, where he's played a challenger. So although it's a challenger, but he's won that event, and he seemed to be really in good form. So him losing to Musetti 6-love and 7-6 was probably one of the biggest upsets of the year. So moving on to the French Open, best matches, 3rd round, Hugo Gaston beating Stan Wawrinka. Wawrinka again having 2 fantastically impressive matches, beating really comfortably Murray in the first round. I think he played Kopfer in the second, pitting him in 4 sets, and comes in as the favorite against Gaston. And Gaston turns the tables. Little guy, young 20-year-old French player, small stature, but fantastic feel for the ball, fantastic drop shots, lobs, and he beats Wawrinka 6-love in the 5th set. Fourth round, featuring again Hugo Gaston, this time playing Dominic Thiem. Thiem wins the first 2 sets relatively comfortably, 4-4. But after that, the tables are turned by Gaston. Gaston plays an incredible amount of drop shots, and Thiem just cannot really handle those drop shots. And even if he reaches them after that, he gets lobbed countless times by Gaston. This is, in my view, one of the best matches of the year in a Grand Slam event. In the end, Thiem edges it 6-3 in the 4th. And very similarly, as Gaston maybe ran out of gas a little bit in that 5th set against Thiem, Thiem does run a little bit out of gas against Schwartzman in that 4th set. He just didn't have enough to put Schwartzman away. It did look like he would win it toward the end of the 4th, but Schwartzman somehow managed to turn the tables, and Thiem was just not 100% there physically in the 5th. Another really good semi-final, Djokovic playing Tsitsipas. Djokovic having a really strong start. You didn't have the impression that Tsitsipas was doing many things wrong in that match, but Djokovic was just too comfortable and too superior to everything Tsitsipas was trying. But Tsitsipas' efforts paid off in the 3rd, in the 4th set, and he's won them both. But in the 5th, similarly, as Thiem faded away against Schwartzman, the same happened to Tsitsipas, maybe even more so, because apparently he got a more serious foot injury, which basically hampered the performances from that point on in the rest of the season. And the final, that was also something super impressive. Nadal beating Djokovic in some style, in really relatively comfortably straight sets. The 3rd set was closer, but the first 2 was a beatdown, really. So the biggest story of the French Open, in my view, is the fact that Nadal has won his 13th French Open title. So that's an unprecedented feat. Nobody has ever won a major 13 times. And especially at the French Open, the person who's won it for the 2nd most times in the Open era is Björn Borg with 6 titles. So Nadal has even more than doubled that. So with his 13th French Open victory, another super impressive thing for Nadal, he equals Roger Federer's 20 Grand Slam title record. So he draws level with Federer and moves 3 titles ahead of Djokovic, who is right now at 17. Notable thing also at this year's French Open, this is the first French Open ever to be played under a roof. They had the roof ready for this edition, and also they had lights for the first time at the French Open for night matches. Also a notable thing, Tsitsipas and Rublev, 2 players who played ahead of the French Open at the tournament in Hamburg, where they've played the final. Both players winning in the first round of the French Open from 2 sets to love down. Young players, promising players, proving that they can also turn the tables in really critical situations and never giving up, even being 2 sets to love down. So that was also an important footnote at this year's French Open. So moving ahead, Paris-Bercy Masters and the times ahead of the Paris-Bercy Masters. Novak Djokovic clinches the year-end world number 1 spot ahead of the Paris Masters in Vienna. He wins his first 2 matches and then loses in the quarterfinals to Lorenzo Sonego 6-2, 6-1. So this match, alongside the Wawrinka loss, are probably the biggest losses, the biggest upsets, so to say, during this year. He seemed out of touch, and given the fact how dominant he was up until to that point, losing that French Open final, this was really something super unexpected. we know that Rafa Nadal doesn't play nowadays as much as he used to when he was younger, and it surprised many players that he decided to play the Paris Masters. He said he was attempting to win it for the first time. During a regular season, normally for Nadal, the end of the year is not the best time because physically he's worn down, he's more tired. Plus, he has to play on a quicker indoor surface. He doesn't really enjoy that much. But it was a good thing to see him at the Paris Masters. He reached the semis, lost to Zverev, and Daniil Medvedev has won his first tournament in Paris, in the Paris Masters, beating Zverev in the final, in a fantastic performance in that final. So he really announced himself being back after the great form he had in the 2019 summer. And the last tournament of the year, the ATP Finals in London. This was held for the 12th straight time in the O2 Arena since 2009. Only the Madison Square Garden in New York has more editions, 13 editions of the year-end championships. I think this year's ATP Finals was one of the best I've ever seen. This is probably a side effect of the fact that there was something like 6 months during the year not played, so no competitive tennis players coming here were a lot fresher. The quality of almost every match was super high, and the matches were really very, very enjoyable. So also a very notable thing throughout this season, in one tournament, and this is the only tournament where it can happen, Novak Djokovic, the world number one, Rafa Nadal, the world number two, who are still the most dominant players at the Grand Slams, were beaten by two players. So Nadal lost the team and Medvedev, and Djokovic has also lost the team and Medvedev in the same tournament. Both went out in the semi-finals in the end, Nadal and Djokovic. Another very impressive thing, Medvedev winning the ATP Finals and with no defeats at all. So in the group stages, he's won all his 3 matches, beating Djokovic as well, then beating Zverev as well, and Schwartzman as well. And in the semis, of course, beating Nadal. Although Nadal was serving in the second set for the match at 5-4, being a breakup, but Nadal has lost that, and Medvedev was clearly stronger in the third set. And Djokovic also going out the team in the third set tiebreaker at the World Tour Finals semi-final match. So that makes Daniil Medvedev the winner of the last tournament of the year, and probably playing his best tennis since that summer from 2019. So the most notable events in 2020, as I said at the beginning about the Australian Open, the bushfire relief, Nick Kyrgios leading the way there, was really a good positive story for the world of tennis, or in the world of tennis. The unfortunate thing, the 6 Masters 1000 tournaments being cancelled and only 3 being played throughout the entirety of the 2020 season. That's unfortunate. Another unfortunate event was the fact that Wimbledon was cancelled for the first time since the Second World War. The French Open was postponed. So during the 2020 season, not 4 but only 3 slams were played. The Adria Tour was one of the biggest disappointments in recent memory regarding an exhibition event. That was not a positive story for tennis in general. Alright, so let's have a look at potentially best match of the year. So I think the best ATP Tour match of the year is the Medvedev-Djokovic match. And Djokovic has won in 3 sets. It was a very hot day. Although the first set was relatively quick, Djokovic winning 6-1, Medvedev really coming back strongly in that second set, he was probably still riding the wave of the victory he had against Djokovic the year before in Cincinnati, where he lost the first set and then he's won the next two. So here he's won the second, 7-5, pushed Djokovic the third set. It was a real dogfight, both players delivering quality tennis, grueling rallies, lots of running, great gaps. So I think it deserves the match of the year title. Close second is probably Thiem against Nadal. That was only 2 sets, but both sets were very tight, very close. Both sets could have gone either way. Both went Dominic Thiem's way, but I think this was a match where I've seen super high quality rallies, point after point after point after point. And it was really so impressive that these guys could sustain that for over 2 hours. It was a match over 2 hours in 2 sets, and the level, the quality was so high for such a long time, and that makes it for me a close second to that other match. That other match had more drama, but from a quality perspective, this is right up there. From a Grand Slam perspective, the best match, I don't know. We had good Grand Slam matches throughout the 2020 season, no doubt about it, but I think the quality was not, the 2019 season was really so fantastically high from a quality perspective in Grand Slam finals especially. We had the Wimbledon final, which was a fantastic performance by Djokovic, Federer, 5 sets, 12 all tiebreak in the decider, a lot of drama back and forth. Also the US Open final between Nadal and Medvedev, Nadal winning the first 2, Medvedev the second 2, and then Nadal edging out the 5th set, so winning the title. We didn't have anything like that. It's really so close. The Australian Open final was a really good 5-setter, but it was not that high super quality kind of intensity which we had at the Wimbledon final last year or at the US Open last year. From a drama perspective, there was the US Open final where Thiem has lost the first 2 sets and won the next 3. And from a drama perspective, that match tops everything. But it was not a beautiful match to watch, where you had one quality rally after the other. So a big no on that note. Possibly the best match I've seen in a Grand Slam this year was the Thiem Gaston match at the French Open. That's a match I've talked about before, where Thiem has won the first 2 sets, Gaston the next 2, and Thiem was just a little bit stronger in the end, but that playing quality and that totally unexpected strength that Gaston has shown in the 3rd, 4th sets, where he's come back and he's won, that incredible amount of drop shots he's managed to put into play, the way Thiem couldn't handle it, and he lobbed Thiem repeatedly over and over again, successfully I might add. That's one of the most spectacular matches I've seen all year, for sure. So that's my best Grand Slam match of 2020. Grand Slam upset of the year, Gaston beating Wawrinka. I've talked about that as well, and the other big upsets, Musetti against Wawrinka in Rome, and Sonego beating Djokovic in Vienna. One of the most impressive young guys outside of the big 3, of course, was Rublev. This year he's won 5 titles. None were Masters 1000s or slams, but nonetheless he was number 23 at the beginning of the year, or finishing last year, and now he's finished the year as ranked number 8. So that's a huge jump and super impressive, 5 titles. Most improved players, in my view, are Thiem and Schwartzman. Thiem reaching 2 Grand Slam finals and none of them being at the French Open. So that's a little bit surprising because we always expected Thiem to be more the clay court player, like his other countryman, his former compatriot Thomas Muster, who's won his only Grand Slam at the French Open in 1995. We sort of expected that, okay, if Nadal maybe goes out or fades a little bit away or whatever, then it's Thiem who can win the French Open, because he's been so close in the last year's final, and 2 years ago he's lost twice against Nadal in the final. This year he goes to the Australian Open, beats Nadal in the quarters, beats Zverev in the semis, and almost beats Djokovic in the final, so that was very impressive. And then at the US Open this year, after Nadal doesn't go to the US Open to defend his title and Djokovic goes out after being defaulted, Thiem basically is the top favorite. He was so nervous as he has made it in the final against Zverev, comes back after losing the first 2 sets and wins. So that was one of the biggest stories for sure. And just the fact that he managed to win his first Grand Slam title at the US Open on a hard court, and that makes him, in my eyes, one of the most improved players. And also the fact how he conducted himself at the World Tour Finals, the performances he's put together, the fact that he's beaten Nadal and Djokovic back to back in the same tournament. He was also close to beating Medvedev. He could have won that match, but maybe again that was a final, and maybe he doesn't feel that comfortable in big finals. I don't know, but he seems to be able, just the way he's beaten Nadal in the Australian Open quarterfinal, or he has edged that match out against Zverev. It shows in the US Open final. It shows some sort of maturity he's reached. And he is able to pull his best out, to play his best when he really needs to. And that's a quality that only really great players possess. And with Thiem, you have the impression that he can do that almost every time he really wants it to. So that makes him one of the most improved players in 2020. Schwarzmann speaks for itself. He's qualified to the year-end championships. He's made his first Grand Slam semi-final, he's played his first Masters final, he's beaten Nadal on clay in Rome, so definitely big steps for the Argentine player. Most improved newcomer of the year, there's absolutely no doubt about that in my mind. It's Yannick Sinner, the guy from Italy, 19 years old. Has just managed to win his first title, his ATP title in Sofia in Bulgaria, ahead of the ATP Finals this year. He's played probably the most competitive match against Nadal at the French Open. He's beaten Zverev at the French Open, so one might expect quite a lot from him during the 2021 season. Okay, the best performance of the year, in my view, in any tennis match was the French Open final by Nadal. So he's won 6-love, 6-2, 7-5 against the world number 1 Novak Djokovic, who himself is also a former French Open winner and multiple finalist. And he's one of the 2 players who's managed ever to beat Nadal at the French Open, and that was in the 2015 quarterfinals. So obviously they've played 7 times before at the French Open, and Nadal was leading 6-1, but it wasn't 6-love. So he was a guy who potentially could have beaten him, and he was on such a hot streak during that entire year that you would have expected that, okay, if it can happen anywhere, then it might be at the French Open in an October tournament, because it was an indoor clay court. They had the roof closed for the final. So indoors normally favors Djokovic, but no, not on that day. So from every perspective and in every department, Nadal was superior. It was a competitive first set, but each and every single game of the first 6 games went Nadal's way. and it took more than 1.5 hours for Djokovic to win his second game of the entire contest, and he lost the first two sets 6-love and 6-2. In the third, it was closer, but it still went Nadal's way. It was 7-5. So the way this downbeat went on, it's a little bit closer, a little bit similar how Djokovic has beaten Nadal in the 2019 Australian Open final, where he was super dominant against Nadal. This reminds me also at maybe the 1999 Wimbledon final where Sampras played Agassi and he was so super dominant, where he ultimately said that was the best performance and the best tennis match he's ever played. I think this match, which Nadal has put together, this performance against Djokovic in the French Open final, that's also one of the most impressive performances you ever see on a tennis court. Okay, so if we look at the top 10, the way the year finished during this year, Djokovic first, Nadal second, Team third, Medvedev fourth, Federer fifth, Tsitsipas at number 6, Zverev 7th, Rublev 8th, Schwarzman 9th, and Matteo Berrettini number 10. So, having recapped every major event and everything that was important happening in the entirety of this season, the Player of the Year award, or I would say who it is, I would have to give it to Novak Djokovic. Just because of the fact that he has won one of the 3 slams in this year. He's played another final. He was in the French Open final. From the 3 Masters titles that were played in this year, he's won 2. He's won Rome and the Cincy in New York. And he's finished the ranking for the 6th time as number 1 player in the world. So with that, he equaled the record of Pete Sampras, who also has 6 number 1 year-end finishes. The difference is Sampras has 6 consecutive. For Djokovic, there were interruptions, but nonetheless, he has the most year-end number 1 finishes among the big 3. Federer has 5, and Nadal has also 5. So, having said that, despite of the fact that he had that big loss against Nadal in that French Open final, he had that dreadful loss against Sonego in Vienna, and maybe he was not at his best at the year-end championships. Despite of all that, his other performances really top him in the 2020 rankings, let's put it like that. So if we go ahead and look at other great achievements from the top 10 players this year, Nadal winning his 13th French Open title and rules level with Federer on the all-time Grand Slam count, wins his 20th Slam. That's super impressive, and one of the stories to cherish for the year of 2020. Another big story, which was also mentioned before, Thiem winning his first Grand Slam title, being the first guy born after the 1980s, being born in 93, who wins the Grand Slam finally at the age of 27. Very important victory for Daniil Medvedev, wins his first ATP Finals. Roger Federer's played just one tournament of the year, but he's played one of the most spectacular matches in his comebacks against John Millman and Tennis Sandgren. But if we talk about comebacks, the fact that Thiem has won the US Open title from 2-0 down, I think that tops even Federer's performance as comebacking this year. For Stefanos Tsitsipas finishing number 6 in this year, it's a decent year for him. He qualified again for the year-end championships. He was the defending champion but didn't qualify beyond the group stages. But he had a fantastic run at the French Open. He reached the semi-finals, which was a great performance for him this year. Zverev. So Zverev is an interesting story. He had a rough start to the year. The double fault king, as some people call him, but he had a strong finish to the year. He wins 2 titles in Köln, and he's reached his first Grand Slam semi-final and final as well, Australian Open and US Open respectively. On the other hand, it needs to be mentioned that Zverev doesn't really have a good reputation at this point, with the accusations going on right now in his private life. Former girlfriend being pregnant, other former girlfriend accusing him of violence, abuse, stuff like that. So really not happy times for Zverev. One can only hope that these abusive behavior, violence allegations are not correct, and even if they are, let's hope he learns from this and it never happens again. Rublev, as I mentioned before, probably one of the most impressive players throughout the 2020 season. It was a year where not many tournaments were played, and despite that, he's managed to win 5 titles. Schwartzman, as I mentioned before, reaches his first Master Final and first Grand Slam semi. Matteo Berrettini, nothing really special in his performance during 2020. He mostly kept his points because of the new ATP rankings pandemic scoring system rules, similar to Roger Federer just playing the one tournament at the beginning of the year. Okay, this basically wraps up the review of 2020. It's a long video, it's an exhaustive one, but I think I've really covered the most relevant, most important stories. In case you think I've forgotten something or something else needed to be mentioned, please let me know down below in the comment section. I hope to see you again in 2021, and during the off season I'm planning to have a few more videos, but more on other great matches from the past, classic matches. I hope you will tune in, enjoy, and see you next time.